Right. Wow. Well, speaking of like lame rhetorical justifications for things,
Right.
we get emails, and a lot of our emails are from fans, and we're happy to hear from you. Hi back. We love you guys. And some of our emails are from theists who want to wag their finger at us, or maybe hit us with some new argument that we don't think, that they don't think we've heard before. And sometimes we get quite a lot of emails from atheists who are themselves engaged in discussions with theists, and they're sort of like, well, how do I reply to that one? And then they usually, sometimes they'll go on to give us the examples of whatever it is, whatever apologetics they're hearing. And I don't know about you, Trace, but I would suspect that you would agree. I've never heard any real exercise in apologetics that to some degree, or to a very great degree, didn't just involve making a bunch of stuff up, asserting the things that you make up as factual,
Right.
not feeling that you have to back them up, and then declaring that you've scored a point or a big argumentative victory.
Yeah, you pretty much have to make things up because you're talking about things that are, by definition, not examinable or verifiable.
Right. And you were talking about earlier, you were dealing with, someone emailed us about problem of evil.
Correct.
And then I had a guy that I was going to respond to. But first off, what came before the whole? We were talking about the child molestation thing.
Right.
That always tends to because that's the most abominable act, I think, across the board that people can sort of bring up whenever you want to talk about evil but we got an email from a theist, and what all did he say about that? Because
that actually was not a discussion I was involved in, but in watching the discussion on the list, it just reminded me of so many past discussions on problem of evil. And I know we've done a show, I think it was Russell who did the show on problem of evil, so I don't want to rehash that, but basically the idea is that since bad things happen to innocent people, and by innocent I would say, let's even say an infant, or good people, or people who don't seem to deserve the horrible things that happen to them, however you want to define it, things happen that aren't good all the time, and when that occurs, and you have, the idea of if someone has a model of a God that is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving, you have to ask yourself, how does evil get through the filter? So, is it that God could stop it and doesn't, and chooses not to, or is it that he would stop it but can't? And I think the thing that stuns me is how many people write to us in order to say, I have a response to problem of evil, and then their rebuttal entails either God being unable to stop it and wanting to, or God being able to stop it but not willing to.
Yeah.
So their rebuttal to problem of evil generally becomes just simply an explanation for why God is willing to allow evil, or how come God can't stop evil.
Right.
And then they say that's the rebuttal.
Admitting that there is a problem does not constitute rebutting the problem.
We understand that it's either allowed or
you're right.
or can't be stopped.
God lets all this stuff happen, you betcha.
And one of
his reasons that we don't get because of our puny human intellect.
One of the ones that comes up most often is God wants to allow free will. And I think we were talking before on the idea that it doesn't always involve will. We had an incident here in Austin, and I almost feel guilty picking on it because my sympathies go out to the family. I don't want to use this as necessarily, I feel bad using this incident, even bringing it up, but I want to just say that, I'm sympathetic to everybody involved in this. But there was an unfortunate incident that happened here not long ago where someone drove to work and they forgot they had their child in the back of the car. And here in Texas during the summer, it gets extremely hot extremely quickly. You cannot leave animals or infants in your vehicle. Even with the windows cracked, it doesn't help. And you would think, like, oh, that's unfortunate, you think you know where this is going, but you don't, because what happened is somebody saw the child in the car, reported it to security, and said there's a baby in a car, and the car's locked, and it's shut up, and there's nobody there. And security apparently was unable to find this vehicle, the woman had left, and the child died. So in this case, this didn't involve a conflict of free will
at any point.
With something bad happening. This was simply someone who did not will their own child to die, who simply forgot. It was just a brain hiccup, forgot something extremely important.
And we'll set aside the whole issue of how a parent can be stupid enough to forget your child.
He's not the first person to have done this. It can happen. It was not a purposeful thing. It was not. He wasn't intending to harm his child. And then what happens is you have a bystander who sees this. She does the right thing and reports this. Then you have security that goes out looking. They don't find this. And at any point in this, there could have been a reasonable save of this child without anybody batting an eye or thinking that it was divine intervention, no show of the hand of God, no violations of physical reality, and it could have just been that the person reported it, security, she brought them to the car, and they found the kid was saved.
Yeah.
So these things happen, and it's not always in conflict with free will. But even when it is, it gets a little hairy, because what happens is they'll say, well, God allows evil because he wants people to be able to do evil. And so they're talking specifically about evil perpetrated on other people by people who intend harm. So we usually ramp it right up to child rape. And the reason we go there is because this is something that is egregious to most people's minds. And so it becomes the perfect model of what to use to say, okay, we all agree this is not good.
Yeah.
So, okay, child rape. And then the response that is most shocking is when people say, well, God wants people to be able to act on their free will, even though he doesn't always like what they do. And the example that I gave was if I open the door of a room and I see a child about to be raped by someone, and I close the door and back out and do nothing, and then someone finds out about that and they confront me, they would think that I was monstrous. And if I were to say, no, believe me, nobody thinks this is more heinous than I do, but the fact is, I don't want to impede the free will and free action of this rapist, because to me, that's a higher priority than this child's welfare and safety. I can't imagine any person not thinking that I was completely inexcusable, like in my action and my explanation. It would be completely non-acceptable to any compassionate human being. And yet, they use this as their model of God, to say that God prefers to protect the will and action of really wicked people instead of defending the helpless. And that in that case, what I have to say is what you're saying is that God is able to intervene but doesn't. So this is unwilling to stop evil, which the problem of evil says, yes, your God is either going to be unwilling to stop this evil or he's going to be unable. And when someone says unable, what we get with the unable is usually they'll say something is required. So they'll say either free will is a requirement of some sort in order to achieve some ends. And what you're saying in that case is that there's not some other way to do this without child rape being a part of this universe. So in other words, God set up this universe in such a way that he's going to let people do what they want to do.
Including that.
Yeah, including child rape. And then he's going to sort this out later, however he's going to sort it out. But the fact is, there could be a universe where there isn't child rape and where people still have free will. And usually, I think it was Jeff who brought up to the person that, do you think there's free will in heaven, and is there child rape in heaven? And normally, everybody will say, yes, you have free will in heaven, and no, there's not child rape. And so it's like, okay, well, then you acknowledge that there is such a universe as one that doesn't restrict your free will and doesn't allow for child rape, and yet this is not the universe that we live in, so what gives? And I just want to kind of point out that if you're going to respond to problem of evil, you're going to have to come up with something different, because both those scenarios hit on either God is unwilling or God is unable to stop, what would be considered evil under the POE.
Yeah, well, and another reason why the appeal to free will fails so phenomenally as a response to the POE is that it fails to make the fundamental distinction between free will and action.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, free
some
will.
Some people don't separate them. I do.
Yeah, well, I think you should, because free will simply implies the ability to make a decision about something, or the ability to want to do something.
Correct.
Or to have a certain viewpoint or mode of thought.
Right.
And but it has nothing to do with the ability to act. I imagine that there are millions of paraplegics in the world who want to be able to walk and run and swim and jump and play and do stuff. I mean, that their free will is saying, damn, I wish I could move and get up out of my wheelchair. But physically they cannot. Okay, so has their free will been impeded? Well, no, it hasn't. Okay, their ability to act has, because they have a physical disability.
Yeah.
But they can want all they want. I mean,
mentally they're not robots.
Right.
They're not stripped of free thought.
And that's the problem when apologists will say, well, but if God interfered, then we'd be automatons and we would not. But no, not really. It's a wonderful response. I think it might have been Jeff some years ago when we were doing the show was. For example, if God were to save a child or to save a person miraculously from some impending disaster, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, well, you'd just be God's robot. And it's like, okay, so if you fell off a pier and I jumped in and saved your life, that means you're my robot, right? Okay, you have to like do every.
Yeah.